I used to think that I could not go on.
Good morning and welcome. And this is Fahima Sek sitting in for our beloved sister Nkinchi Torre. And you're listening to In Our Voices. I want to again thank everyone who participated in our pledge drive, and please be sure to send in your pledges, and we'll be gearing up not too long from now for our winter or fall pledge drive, so please stay tuned. Today's show, I want to deal with some very important and sensitive issues. I have invited in studio my beloved sister Eraka Rouzorondu, who is a poet, empowerment specialist, and a healer of sorts. So we will be right back after the break, and we will be joined by our sister.
Failing to signal a lane change.
Riding in your girlfriend's car with a child in the back.
Run into the bathroom in your own apartment.
Selling cigarettes outside of a corner store.
Riding a commuter train.
Walking home with a friend.
Making eye contact.
Selling CDs outside of a supermarket.
Wearing a hoodie.
Walking away from police.
Walking toward police.
Missing a front license plate.
Holding a fake gun in the park in Ohio.
Driving with a broken brake light.
Sitting in your car before your bachelor party.
Walking up the stairwell of your apartment building.
Calling for help after an accident.
Holding a fake gun in Virginia.
On the way to Bible study.
Holding a fake gun in Walmart.
Laughing.
Holding a wallet.
For attending a birthday party.
Doing absolutely nothing.
Not servile enough.
Go to weareheremovement.com to tell President Obama and Congress that the time for change is now. We demand radical transformation to heal a long history of systemic racism so that all Americans have the equal right to live and to pursue happiness.
That's from a project done by Alicia Keys and Beyonce and a number of other celebrities dealing with the issue of the recent spate of police shooting and violence. And I thought it was important today to have a discussion about these issues. And so what immediately came to my mind to bring back to the WPFW audience, empowerment specialist and healer and facilitator Eraka Rouzorondu to help facilitate that discussion. So I'm going to bring the sister on board. At the bottom of the hour, in our last half hour, we'll take some calls from you, but I want to have an exchange with her about these issues. Sister Eraka, welcome back to the airways of WPFW.
Thank you, Sister Fahima. My pleasure to be here, and good morning to the WPFW family.
I'm sure you are well aware of the recent spate of police violence, black and brown people being shot down in the streets, unarmed. And for me personally, before you can resolve or grieve one issue, there's another. We were dealing with the situation in Oklahoma and in North Carolina. And actually last night on the West Coast, someone was shot by the police. Where do we go? What do we do? What are the answers?
Well, first of all, for those of you who may have to run, I want to give my website so that you can contact me. It is maatenterprises.com. That's MAAT enterprises.com. In response to your question, sister, a couple of things. One, these aren't waves. They aren't spates. This is a consistent and ongoing phenomenon. The ones that we see are the ones that the media or social media selects. But this happens every day. If you follow me on Facebook, you know, my introduction every time I post something about this is every day, every single day, everywhere. So this is happening all the time, even if, and what we know is that things that have been documented as resisting arrest and anything else by the police also fall into these categories. If these people, if these things had not been videotaped and publicized, they would just be documented as, you know, killed resisting arrest. So
you're absolutely correct.
It's far more pervasive and consistent and persistent. It is every day, every single day, everywhere.
I know that the Malcolm X Grassroots organization had compiled a report, and last year it was every 28 hours a person of African ancestry is murdered by the police. And since then, since they did that report last year, the numbers have actually increased. So it's more than every 28 hours. But you're absolutely correct. And I think with the advent of social media, we are seeing it. But you're right. It hasn't gotten any more frequent than usual. It's just that it has been documented more readily
the only
because
thing
of
different,
technology.
Yeah, cell phones and social media. That's the only thing different. The good news about this is that now everyone sees it. Now it's in everyone's face. Well, let me rephrase that. Now it is visible. Not everyone can see it. Let me say that again. Now it is visible, but not everyone can see it. There are still people, black and white, who refuse to acknowledge that this is happening and that it is racial. And obviously, as we know, the system is refusing to respond to it appropriately. So I know we want to talk about coping with the trauma that we experience as witnesses to these events.
This is important. It's important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I want to first state very clearly, I am not a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I am a sister who grew up in Queens, New York, and came into consciousness in 1983. I was reborn into African-centered consciousness in 1983. I'm an empowerment specialist. And I define power as the ability to create your own reality. So this morning, it's not my goal to equip you to, quote unquote, cope with the abject slaughter of black people by police, because I don't believe it's something that we should be coped with. And let me be clear about that. Historically, we've set our bar at coping. I went to a presentation done by an activist lately, and she opened her talk by talking about our resiliency. See, and setting the bar at coping and resiliency is one of the reasons that we're in this situation. Because when we frame our experience in terms of coping and being resilient, what we're saying is the goal is to survive it. And that's not the goal. The goal is to stop it and to neutralize or mitigate its impact on us. So it's my goal for you to defend yourself against the mental, emotional, and spiritual genocide that results from the physical one we have always been and continue to experience in this country. It's my goal to empower you to navigate these times with strength and dignity while remaining vigilant and active in doing the work that must be done. We can't crawl into bed and stay there because we've got work to do. And let me say something about crawling into bed and staying there, because the mind protects itself from trauma. This past Sunday was my 55th birthday, and anyone who knows me knows that I am unabashed in my self-celebration, usually on my birthday. I'm blowing up Facebook. This is me with my left foot forward. This is me with my right foot forward. Everywhere I've been, what I'm doing, what I'm eating, what I'm drinking, just joy. But on September 24th, I saw Mrs. Walter Scott's video of the lynching of her husband. And I spent my birthday alone in my apartment, sleeping, weeping, cussing, and grieving. And part of our ability to navigate this situation is doing exactly that. Being conscious of the impact of what's happening on you psychologically, spiritually, and emotionally. We have to stop as individuals. I'm talking about individual coping now. Individual survival, individual vigilance. You have to stop. Something's going to have to get canceled. Something's going to have to be postponed. Someone's going to have to hear the word no, because you're going to have to take time to sit and allow yourself to wallow in the reality of this situation. We've got to deal with it emotionally, because otherwise we push it to our subconscious and it lingers there and it destroys us bit by bit. So we can't crawl into bed and stay there. We've got work to do. Now, reality is created first and foremost by thought. Reality is whatever you think, whatever you say, and whatever you do. And that begins with your thoughts. The thoughts you think about anything reflect your personal truth. And your personal truth should be based upon a courageous and committed dedication to facing the facts. Now, for 30 years, I've been providing African Americans with the historical and contemporary facts that empower us to arrive at a powerful new truth about what it means to be Black in America. And I'm now empowering white people as well. But we have to face the facts. Now, on a personal level, first of all, we have to move what we are experiencing individually from our subconscious mind to our conscious mind. We have to confront it, because you cannot heal what you cannot confront. And I'm not talking about blowing up social media. I'm not talking about emoting. I'm talking about sitting alone in a room or a park or a sanctuary and analyzing and internalizing the reality in which we find ourselves. We have to face the facts to replace the so-called facts about what it means to be Black in America. All right? Because it's upon the facts that we base our personal truth and therefore our reality. So the fact is, you are witnesses to the murder of another human being. And not just one murder, because we can sit here and name 10 prominent ones from just, the past month, 2 months alone. That witnessing is an experience that's extremely traumatic, and the human mind defends itself against trauma by shutting down. Now, we could call this post-traumatic stress disorder. People do. But the fact is, it is present traumatic stress disorder. It is permanent traumatic stress disorder. Because one thing we know is that this is not going to go away. That is a fact. Let me say that again. And this is what I mean about sitting down and confronting this reality, facing the facts. This isn't going to go away. We have been engaging in moral appeals. You cannot make a moral appeal to an immoral society. And by its actions and inactions, the systems responsible for dealing with this situation have demonstrated to us they have absolutely no intention of addressing this in a meaningful way. So that's a fact. The fact is, it will continue to happen. So we have to develop a way to think about it that defends against our personal psychological collapse. We were talking before we went on the air, Fahima, and you were saying that because it's so rapid fire in terms of the frequency that we don't have time to go through the stages of grieving. And my response to that is absolutely, but that means we can't grieve. Mm-hmm. On some level, we have to experience this in a way that defends us, if you will, against long-term grieving. And I know how that sounds, but I hope you understand, and the listeners understand the analysis. This is where we live. And this is going to continue with frequency. And my position is that we can't do the withdrawal thing that is human in response. We can't cope with it. We have to defend against it.
You're listening to Pacifica Radio, WPFW 89.3 on your FM dial, and this is In Our Voices. I am Fahima Sack, sitting in for our beloved sister Nkinji Toure, and my in-studio guest is Eraka Rouzorondu, who is trying to help us analyze this, dissect it, and get a greater and deeper understanding of what the reality is.
Thank you. Again, if you'd like to reach me, my website is maatenterprises.com. That's MAAT enterprises.com. Now, in my presentation, The Good News About Racism, I offer the following living, working definition of racism. You know, a lot of people say, oh, you have to change your thinking, but they don't tell you what to think. So I'm offering you how to think about racism in a way that empowers you to defend your psycho-emotional reality. Racism is a mental illness rooted in ignorance and xenophobia. Xenophobia is a baseless fear of the unknown. Racism is a mental illness rooted in ignorance and xenophobia. So any individual with a perception of reality that he or she is entitled to deliberately murder another person is suffering from a form of sociopathology. That is a fact. Any person so fearful of another person because of their appearance that he or she will murder that person is suffering from a form of paranoia in its most extreme form. That is a fact. And if it's true for an individual, it's true for a collective. So what we are experiencing, what we are witnessing on a core level is sick people being sick. Now listen to this sentence very carefully, because it's going to be hard to hear and even harder to internalize. You are not required to invest yourself emotionally in the mental illness of another human being. You are not required to invest yourself emotionally in the mental illness of another human being, because doing so will result in your own mental illness, such as permanent traumatic stress disorder and depression. So what I'm asking you to do is to separate your emotional reaction to the senseless murder of another person from your emotional investment in the actions of the murderer. Express your shock, your rage, and your grief in whatever way you need to. That shut down thing, that go within thing, that stop everything thing. Do that for yourself. But then understand the purpose of emotions, the purpose served by your emotions is to forge your identity and distill your personal truth. Your emotional reactions to something are what inform you about what you believe to be right and wrong. So the sadness and the grief is appropriate. We're talking about the death of another human being. But the rage, the purpose of the rage is to inform you that this is not a just system and that we are not the beneficiaries of justice in America. Once you internalize that truth, the rage has served its purpose, and you should then be working on releasing it, because otherwise it will debilitate you. Emotions serve to forge your identity and distill your personal truth. So if you embrace the fact, the thought pattern that racism is a mental illness, you can begin to internalize the truth that what you are witnessing is a sick person being sick. And that truth will help defend your psycho-emotional well-being. Instead of internalizing that mental illness to the point where it makes you mentally ill. A line in one of my poems says, "If I let them take my soul, they will have won." So I submit that the thought pattern that we should work to embrace individually is that we are watching sick people be sick. And we are entitled to our grief. We are entitled to our emotional response, and we should experience it completely. But we should separate that from being emotionally invested in the mental illness of the murderers. That we should guard ourselves against that rage so that we can navigate this situation, remain whole mentally, spiritually, and emotionally, and most importantly in my book, remain vigilant, able to continue to confront this reality and do the things that need to be done.
Well, I know for me, the Emmett Till for me was in 1976. Randolph Evans was murdered by a New York City police officer, and I think in Brooklyn in one of the public housing buildings. And I knew that I was 15 years old, like Randolph Evans. And as a child, a teenager, it said to me that this could happen to me as well. Mm-hmm. And living in New York, there was the Eleanor Bumpers and the Michael Stewarts and on and on and on and on. And actually there was a poem I had written called The African American Blues that included Abner Louima. And of course, the brother that was shot in the up in the Bronx. And this was the 20th century. It was a litany of people who had been murdered by the police. Amadou Diallo, up into the latter part of the 90s, and then all of a sudden, here we go again. Trayvon Martin, of course, was killed by vigilante, and he was acquitted. And what happens is the community whatever part of the country, the community becomes outraged. And I'm seeing a younger group of people, because I know I'm going back and forth. But with Amadou Diallo, I remember I was a student at Howard University, and it was like maybe midnight. And I was studying for an exam, and student government said, we got a bus going up to New York to participate in the demonstration. And those of us that were in the library with the clothes on our backs, at moment's notice, we got on the bus and went up to New York to walk across the Brooklyn Bridge in protest of what had happened to Abner Louima, demanding, justice. And, it's time. Fast forward, it's gone on and on. Tamir Rice, Sandra Bland, so on and so on and so on.
Every single day, everywhere. Mm-hmm. That is a fact, and this is the fact we have to sit with, because we are a hopeful people. We are a spiritual people. It's hard for us to grasp this kind of barbarity. But it is real, and we have to face it. This happens every day, every single day, everywhere. And this system has absolutely no intention of addressing it.
Absolutely.
They've made that abundantly clear.
And even with the advent of a black president and 2 black attorney generals, which is really very telling, is simultaneously, because you had Ferguson, then shortly after that a year or so later you had Baltimore, but you got simultaneously stuff going on. Oklahoma right now, North Carolina, and now near San Francisco. And it's got to stop.
Well, it won't stop. You've attended my presentation, The Good News About Racism. It won't stop, because racism is a mental illness. And until you address that mental illness through intensive psychotherapy and factual re-education, it won't stop. Face the facts, people. It won't stop. And this then begs the question, okay, so what do we do? That is a big question with a big answer. And we can't deal with that now. Please get on my email list, maatenterprises.com. We can't deal with that here because right now, before we can even have that conversation, if we can't face the facts that it's not going to stop, it has never stopped.
No, you're right.
It has absolutely never stopped in 400 years. So the expectation that this is going to stop is unreasonable and a symptom of our mental illness. And until we address that absolute inability, that cognitive dissonance, until we address that and break down and say, okay, I get it. I'm not an American. I get it. You don't want me here. You don't see me as human. You're not ever going to get out of my way and let me do what I want to do, to live my life, raise my children, live in love and happiness. That is never going to be your goal. So now I'm going to ... And again, that's another conversation, but we must have a courageous and committed dedication to facing the facts of what it means to be Black in America, or we will not survive this.
Let me just say this before we go to the break, and on the other side of the break, we're going to take phone calls. Let me just say this. No, we understand that this is cognitive dissonance. We do understand that, for example, when I went to your empowerment program, there were white people in the room. In fact, there were more white people than people of color in the room. And these were people who were ready, willing, and able to make a change, realizing there was something wrong. Those are not the ones that are shooting us down in the street.
Absolutely.
And so the vigilantes, these neo-Nazis, some of them have infiltrated the police departments across the nation.
Okay, wait a minute. Let me jump in there. It's not some of them have infiltrated. In 2006, the FBI did a report. The FBI did a report saying that the infiltration of the police system in the United States of America by racist white supremacists had reached an epidemic proportion. So these police officers, many of them, particularly the ones in the power structure, are dedicated, committed, racist white supremacists, many of them neo-Nazis with traceable ties to neo-Nazi organizations. So the idea that we are going to legislate them into controlling the same behavior of the officers is cognitive dissonance.
I agree. In fact, just to mention with respect to Chicago, all of these shootings in Chicago, I've talked with people from Chicago and they don't believe that this is quote unquote all black on black crime. There's something more to it with respect to the shootings in Chicago. But the point I was trying to make is that the veridical, which is somewhat, and I'm characterizing it as a rites of passage for white people, and that's my language.
And mine.
These folks that are willing, those folks that were at your workshop, they were ready, willing, and able to make a change. Many of the those collaborators, if you say, they say, we don't want white people to be partners in this issue. We want them to be collaborators. And the fact that those that are collaborators aren't the ones that are shooting us in the streets. It is those neo-Nazis.
Right.
It is those ones who have infiltrated the police department. They're not ready for the veridical.
Right. Well, power is the ability to create your own reality, and all of my work is empowerment work. The veridical is an intensive rites of passage for white people who are committed to overcoming white supremacy and understanding white privilege. The awakening is the rites of passage for African Americans with the same commitments. I'm offering the awakening in Baltimore the last weekend in October and the veridical in Baltimore the first weekend in November. The purpose of the Good News About Racism, the reason I am attracting now and training white people who get it is because we have to meet energy with equal and opposing energy. We're at war. We are at a psychological and moral war. And for black people, it literally is the war for the continued existence of our race. If you really understand the status of black people in this country and the power of the American government on black people around the diaspora, you really understand that we are at war. Now, war is when two sides face each other. We are not facing the other side. So what I am doing through the awakening and the veridical is training people, giving them that factual, historical foundation for a new perception of reality to empower us to do exactly what the neo-Nazis did. The Klan announced in 1979, no more marching in the street in sheets. They were going to infiltrate the police department. Mm-hmm. They were going to infiltrate the Board of Education. Mm-hmm. They were going to infiltrate government on all levels. That's what we have to do. See, good assumes itself. Good people think other people are good. So we assume that good is going to triumph, but God helps those who help themselves. Evil asserts itself. Good has now got to assert itself. We've got to take these good intentions and transform them into the infiltration of political and other systems in this country.
Okay, this is Fahima Sek, and this is WPFW 89.3 on your FM dial. You're listening to In Our Voices. I am joined in studio with Empowerment Specialist Eraka Rouzorondu, and we're going to take a break. And we will take your calls. I understand that the phones are blowing up. So let me give that number out, 202-588-0893. I was about to give the pledge number, but please go online and do give a pledge, 202-588-0893 if you have a question or comment. And we will right back to take your calls on the other side of this.
We'll believe in freedom cannot rest. You believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. We'll believe in freedom cannot rest. Hear me talking to you. We'll believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Until the killing of black men, black mother sons is as important as the killing of white men, white mother sons.
We're back, and this is Fahima Sek, and you're listening to In Our Voices, and I'm sitting in for our beloved sister Nkinchi Torre, and I hope she's somewhere listening. Our in-studio guest is Eraka Rouzorondu, who is an empowerment specialist, a poet, and an author, and I understand that our phones were blowing up during the first half hour of our show, so I want to give you the opportunity to join the discussion. The number to call is 202-588-0893 if you have a question or comment, and I understand we have some calls in the queue. So I go to you, Brother Ian. Please, first caller, question, comment, your name, and where you're calling from.
My name is Rachel Reich. I'm calling from Arlington, Virginia. And my question is related to the fact that, I am a white person, and I completely understand that the system in the U.S. has been built on bias. And I'm wondering what someone like me who works 7 days a week can do to help, a lot of times I hear about this, but I don't feel like there's a lot I can do. What's something that I could do to help or grow my awareness, or, I understand that I have biases that are built in. So what can I do to kind of help?
Go online and Google racial awareness workshops. There are a number of organizations that do racial justice and racial bias workshops that offer trainings, etc. You're in Virginia. There's probably a Universalist Unitarian Universalist Church there. The Unitarian Universalists are a predominantly white institution that have committed, absolutely committed, to raising awareness about white privilege and working towards dialogues that empower white people to take effective action in their own lives and in the lives of others. So I would definitely encourage you to touch base with your local Unitarian Universalist Church. I have the privilege of working with the one in Towson, and find out what they're doing in terms of what they call a dialogue on racial justice.
I also want to add that you also do a veridical, which is somewhat of a rites of passage and empowerment for white people. I think that the caller might be a very good candidate for that process. So I'd encourage you, give her the website and how she can get that information as well, Eraka.
My website is maatenterprises.com. That's MAAT enterprises.com. Click on the link for Progressive Human Being. You'll see the veridical there as a link as well. Now, the veridical is an intensive rite of passage. Friday from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., Saturday from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., Sunday from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., and then there's a bus trip on that Monday. So it's an entire weekend. And, I don't know whether or not you can do that, but I'm also offering a series of presentations of the good news about racism, which are free with pre-registration, and you can get information on that from my website as well. So I encourage you to come and attend my presentations. You're going to hear things that you won't hear elsewhere. But in terms of your broadening your own awareness, that's something that, and I want to say this too, that's something white people have to do amongst white people. It's their experience of this needs to be like sort of protected, like you're protecting an infant, something in its infancy. So I encourage you to join a local group that is having these conversations and engaging and broadening their perspective, in addition to availing yourself of the free presentation, The Good News About Racism, and bring me there. Set up a library room and bring me there. I will come where you are and do that. And that's for anybody in the listening audience, DC, wherever you're listening from. Contact me about doing an offering of The Good News About Racism in your community, so that we can help galvanize not just black people, but white people as well. And I want to say that the two rites of passages are race specific. The awakening is for black people. The veridical is for white people, because they're two very different thrusts, two very different experiences, two very different contexts, and two very different missions. You also may want to Google something called allyship, racial allyship. This is the name given to white people who want to support black people's efforts towards racial justice.
But there's
and
a shift. Instead of what black people are calling for is not allies. We're calling for collaborators. White people who are willing to put their lives and livelihood on the line for justice. I wanted to also say that the first Sunday in every month at Busboys and Poets at 14th and V, we have a continuing talk on race, and that is a multiracial group. And what we generally do, we may not necessarily talk about stuff on a therapeutic level, but we deal with some of the issues around race, and I'm on the working group. That's the first Sunday in every month at Busboys and Poets on 14th and V. We have another caller, question or comment, where you're calling from, your name.
Fort Washington, Maryland. My name is Ron.
And your question or comment, Ron?
My comment would be to address my memories of seeing Rodney King struck 72 times by those cops that all had to be racist to beat a man like that, to shoot Amadou Diallo in New York 42 times, and these things go to court and juries come up with not guilty. I can hardly wrap my head around that. Because it's obvious right there on tape, and now we have the cops in D.C. with the cameras, and they have been instilled in order probably to keep their jobs, to become racist, to not turn on the camera because they haven't been trained to turn the camera on. which is absolutely ridiculous.
Because they've been trained how to shoot a gun and kill someone, but they haven't been trained how to turn a camera on.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for that, because that was my wake-up call. April 29th, 1992 is when I understood that I will not achieve the justice that my people have been fighting for decades. I was in Los Angeles when the verdict was announced, and when I tell you that there was a spiritual death that took place on a mass scale, and understand this, that dream, that propaganda remains dead in me. I know better. And the good news about that is I'm not going to be shocked when it continues to happen. You know, a lot of what we're experiencing emotionally, oh my God, I'm not shocked. I get it. I know what it means to be black in this country. I've always known. And once we embrace that fact and we start developing a truth, we can eliminate the whole, oh my God, piece and say, okay, this is consistent. Now, what am I going to do about it? So thank you. Yeah, that was my wake-up call. That was what removed my cognitive dissonance about the reality of black people in the United States of America.
You know, what's very telling is, you know, our young people, they take it to the street, and most recently from Ferguson to Baltimore, etc. And there are those that contend, oh, we have to give the system an opportunity to work. But the system has continued to fail us. You know, we've been told, and I'm not in any way condoning and saying that we need to take it to the street and condoning, and I don't call it a riot, it is a rebellion. It is righteous anger, and I understand it. But the thing is that, you know, we're constantly being told to give the system an opportunity to work its cause. You know, they recently indicted the police officer for shooting the gentleman in, I think it was Arizona. And the thing is, I don't think she's going to get, I think she's going to get off. She's not going to serve any time. She's going to get off. In recent memory, the only police officer, the one who was also in Oklahoma, and actually this took place in Oklahoma, the policeman who was raping black women, he did get time. But he wasn't white, he was Asian. And the policeman in New York who shot the gentleman in the pink houses, he was used as an example, and he was a scapegoat because he was Asian. And then after he was indicted and prosecuted and convicted, the same prosecutor called that he not serve any time.
I want to address the idea that the system is failing us. The system isn't failing us. The system is doing exactly what it was created to do. The police force in America started with patrollers, people who were looking for runaway slaves to re-enslave them and send them back to the South.
That's the history.
That's how it started. And this protect and serve business that has nothing to do with human beings. The function of the police force is to protect corporate property and public property, period.
That's right.
I also want to say that this is the reason people get these jobs. They get, if you were a homicidal racist, what job would you get?
A prison guard or a police officer.
In Baltimore, in a predominantly black neighborhood, so you could shoot with impunity, knowing that you have the support of your
PBA.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So the idea that we're going to let the system work is, again, a symptom of cognitive dissonance. Now, do I believe we shouldn't petition for what is supposed to be right? No. But we have to do it because it is the right thing to do, because it is an act of self-defense, and not be tied to the outcome.
So respectable Negro politics aren't going to work?
Well, I'll just say we've been doing the same thing over and over again for a few decades.
And that's insanity.
It's insanity.
I'm going to go to the caller that's on the line. Question or comment, and where you're calling from.
Oh, yes, please. Yeah, my name is Brother Ed. Yeah, I'm calling actually from Havre de Grace, Maryland. I was just on the road, and it's an excellent program. The speaker has just really driven it home. I remember when the Trayvon Martin verdict was read. It was on a Saturday night, which is kind of an unusual time frame for a verdict to be read. But anyway, when the verdict was read that Zimmerman was going to be acquitted of all charges, I mean, I was just literally numb. I couldn't believe it. And my phone started ringing, and I started calling other friends of mine. And this was around 11 o'clock at night. I remember it was at night, and it was on a Saturday night. And I was in downtown Washington, D.C., near the Verizon Center. And just everybody, it's like it just sucked the air out of the room.
That's right.
People were like, can you really believe
yes.
that this man got off on killing that boy?
Yes.
And then just a few weeks ago, back in the summer, Philando Castillo, a police officer, shoots a man in the car with his girlfriend and a 4-year-old child in the back seat 4 times. Not once, but 4 times. I mean, can you imagine what that is like for a woman and a small child to witness that?
Actually, that was just about a month and a half ago. And it happens so frequently, we think, with the cumulative effect, we think it was some time ago. And it just continues on and on and on and on again. But I want to thank you for your call.
And what I was talking about earlier about separating our grief over the death of the person from our rage over the insanity of the murderer. If we don't expect justice, we won't be devastated when we don't get it. If we stop expecting something that has never been promised to us, then we will no longer be devastated when we don't get it. And that emotional debilitation, that psychological debilitation, and that rage can be mitigated. And that is my overarching message about, quote unquote, coping with what is happening to us in America. We have to sidestep the grieving process, because this is not post-traumatic. This is present and permanent traumatic.
I think we have another caller on the line, and in the remaining time, we can get these calls in 202-588-0893. Call a question or comment, and where you're calling from.
Good morning. My name is Diane, and I'm calling from Beltsville, and I am so proud of you all for bringing this to light. I was raised by Southern folk. They taught us that you are a black child in a country that does not see you as a human being. They trained us. We have to realize that our trauma does last. My trauma was at 6 years old when the police beat my father in front of me. And I cry every time I see this on. I can't help it. It's the trauma. It's the anxiety that builds up. A lot of us are suffering this, and it's time for us to get together, and I thank you for this. Keep it going. We need each other.
Thank you. Thank you for your call. You're absolutely right. And your parents did the right thing. See, part of the unfortunate piece is that we still have parents telling their children that if you go to school, if you get a good job, if you go to college,
you can still get shot.
Live the American dream.
You can still get shot.
That is just, it's no longer, and never has been, but now we know that that is not the truth. So we have to start training our children. We have to relieve them of the propaganda. Other cultures do it because they have independent, cultural-based education systems, Saturday schools, etc. We have got to start re-educating our young people so that we have an empowered future and not continue to be shocked and aghast at something that has been consistent and will be consistent. These people are not going to change. And let me tell you the one surprise I did have, the one thing that has come from this that's new to me. I used to believe that it was maybe 20% of white America that was rabid racist, and that they had moved into positions of power and were manipulating the systems, this small minority. But what I know now with the presidency, the candidacy of Donald Trump is it ain't 20-80, it's 80-20.
Yeah, that's about right.
It's 80-20.
That's about right. I have another call on the line. I'm trying to get it in before we round up. Question or comment, and where you're calling from? I can't hear you. Yes. If you have a question or comment, please turn your radio down. Please turn your radio off. Question or comment.
Email address, that's all.
Okay, she'll give that out.
Okay, the email is power@maatenterprises.com. The website is maatenterprises.com. That's MAAT enterprises.com. If you don't have access to email or the web, I can be reached at 410-240-9572. Please don't call me to chat. Call to get information.
MAATenterprises.com.
MAATenterprises.com.
MAAT, okay.
All right, 410-240-9572 if you don't have internet access.
I have another caller on the line, question or comment, and where you're calling from. I'm trying to get him in as quickly as possible because we're winding down. Caller, are you there?
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
Okay, please speak up into your phone. Question or comment, very quickly.
I just have a comment.
Yes, sir.
It's amazing. After all 200 and 300 years of lynching, we still have a tendency to hope that Caucasian people will change. Don't you know when white people decide within themselves that they're going to stop killing us, that's the only way it's going to stop. I'm going to tell you the reason why. People are not going to change until they change what is in their heart. Now, you can start praying, which is good. It's better than sleep. But we have to understand the reality. The apple do not fall too far from the tree. Black lives matter. And when you find just as many Caucasian people that have been hung publicly in the United States than we have, then we can start saying that all lives matter. So once again, people are not going to change until they change what is in their heart. Period.
That's right. You can't legislate the human heart. And one of the reasons, after 30 years of empowering African Americans, I am now expanding my work to empower white people is because they have to change the system from within.
Okay, we're winding down. I want to thank all the callers for calling in. I want to thank Sister Eraka Rouzorondu for joining us in the studios for this edition of In Our Voices. I want you to give your contact information once again before we sign off.
Again, my name is Eraka Rouzorondu. My website is maatenterprises.com. That's MAAT enterprises.com. You can get information on the upcoming free sessions of the good news about racism, and that will give you an overview of the veridical, a rite of passage for European Americans, being held November 4th through 7th, and the awakening, the rite of passage for African Americans, being held October 28th through the 31st, both in Baltimore.
I want to thank Brother Ian on the ones and twos, and I'm glad we had an opportunity to finally meet because I've been listening to him doing community watch and comment. And I want to, speaking of community watch and comment, please stay tuned for Brother David Whetstone for community watch and comment and for all the programs throughout the day. This is Fahima Sek signing off for In Our Voices.